test for Supreme Court justices, even though George W. Bush made it clear that he personally opposed Roe versus Wade, he never said that it was a requirement for justices appointed by him to overturn Roe versus Wade. That was Donald Trump's intemperate innovation. And it won Donald Trump the White House because extreme anti-abortion Republican voters did not trust Donald Trump on abortion, and for very good reason. They heard the replay of his comments to Howard Stern about how disappointed he was in 1993 when his girlfriend told him she was pregnant with the child who would become his second daughter. Donald Trump told Howard Stern that when he heard his girlfriend tell him this is what he said.
But, you know, at the time, it was like, excuse me, what happened? And then I said, well, what are we going to do about this? She said, oh, are you serious? This is the most beautiful day of our lives. I said, oh, great.
Not, isn't that wonderful? What are we going to do about this? There were only two options, an abortion or a baby. Donald Trump made it very clear to Howard Stern that he got the answer he didn't want to hear. The girlfriend was going to have the baby. That's how she became the second Mrs. Donald Trump with the shortest tenure as a Trump wife. We have no idea how Donald Trump felt when the third Mrs. Donald Trump broke the news to him that she was pregnant with his third son. Men in 20 states are not allowed to ask women, what are we going to do about this? When a woman tells them she is pregnant. Not anymore. Donald Trump took that away. He took away that conversation from those people. Donald Trump took away the rights that enabled him to say to his girlfriend, what are we going to do about this, when she was pregnant. Donald Trump is telling American men, you don't get to have the option that I always had whenever anyone told me she was pregnant. Donald Trump could say, what are we going to do about this? Every single time to a wife or a girlfriend. And now people are dying. Women are dying. The choices made by George W. Bush and Donald Trump are now killing people. ProPublica is now reporting about the death of a 28-year-old woman in Georgia who died because of what George W. Bush and Donald Trump did to her when they appointed those Supreme Court justices. Amber Nicole Thurman was a healthy 28-year-old medical assistant who was the mother of a 6-year-old boy. And the choices made by George W. Bush and Donald Trump and the Republican Supreme Court justices and Republican politicians in Georgia, using the tools that those Supreme Court justices gave them, killed her. ProPublica reports, in her final hours, Amber Nicole Thurman suffered from a grave infection that her suburban Atlanta hospital was well equipped to treat. She'd taken abortion pills and encountered a rare complication. She had not expelled all of the fetal tissue from her body. She showed up at the Piedmont Henry Hospital in need of a routine procedure to clear it from her uterus called a dilation and curettage, or D&C. But just that summer, her state had made performing the procedure a felony, with few exceptions. George W. Bush, in his silent retirement in Texas, made that routine medical procedure a felony. Donald Trump is proud to noisily take credit for overturning Roe versus Wade and claiming that we all wanted that to happen, and he is pretending that he has no blood on his hands. Donald Trump is pretending that he had nothing to do with making a procedure, a routine medical procedure like a D&C, a felony. Amber Nicole Thurman would be alive tonight if the Supreme Court had not handed the 2000 presidential election to George W. Bush. Without George W. Bush's appointees to the Supreme Court, Amber Nicole Thurman would be alive tonight. She would be a healthy, happy mother of her young son, who was forced by George W. Bush and Donald Trump to attend his mother's funeral at age 6. When I was 6 years old, my mother had the same medical procedure that Amber Nicole Thurman desperately needed to live. My mother had given birth to 5 healthy children, but she kept going. She was trying to have a sister for her only daughter, trying for one more. And she suffered a miscarriage, and she routinely had a D&C at a local hospital in Boston years before abortion was legal, because D&C has absolutely nothing to do with abortion. None of the Catholic nuns teaching me at my elementary school then thought my mother should not have that procedure. Our beloved Monsignor Brandley knew that when mothers in St. Brendan's Parish had miscarriages, the doctors should give them whatever treatment they needed. Anti-abortion Catholic doctors performed that procedure routinely. There wasn't a single Irish Catholic politician in Boston, including the mayor and the district attorney, who ever tried to interfere with that medical procedure. Their sisters were having that procedure. Their daughters were having that procedure routinely in anti-abortion Boston, because it has nothing to do with abortion. Nothing. If a politician interfered with that procedure and killed my mother when I was 6 years old, who's going to tell that boy? Who's going to tell that 6-year-old how his mother died and who is really responsible? The D&C procedure was routine in many areas of the country long before abortion was legal. Outlawing that procedure is sheer madness, criminal madness, murderous madness. Outlawing the D&C procedure is as insane as outlawing in vitro fertilization, which anti-abortion Republicans want to do. IVF has nothing to do with abortion, but every Republican, every single one of them in the United States Senate today, except for two women Republican senators, they stood up, they voted against a bill to guarantee the legality of IVF in all 50 states. The bill required 60 votes to pass the Senate today. It got 51. And 44 Republicans playing politics with reproduction voted against it. And that was enough to kill the bill. That minority in the Senate was enough to kill the will of the American people and the will of the United States Senate. Donald Trump insists that he personally is in favor of IVF, but he did not order his vice presidential candidate, Senator J.D. Vance, to return to the Senate today and vote for that bill.
I think it's unfortunate. As someone myself who ran for president, I would try my best to be back for very important votes. I think Kamala Harris has had to be back to break ties throughout the last few years, change her schedule, be there. Unfortunate if J.D. Vance is not here to vote. I don't know if he's going to be, but it appears that this would be a moment for them to really show that they stand by their words, and that is that they want to see IVF continue.
Amber Nicole Thurman would be alive tonight if Donald Trump did not win the Electoral College in 2016. Donald Trump increased the Republican majority in the United States Supreme Court and started the clock ticking on Amber Nicole Thurman's life. They got what they wanted. George W. Bush and Donald Trump overturned Roe versus Wade, and now Amber Nicole Thurman is dead. The ProPublica report continues. Any doctor who violated the new Georgia law could be prosecuted and face up to a decade in prison. Thurman waited in pain in a hospital bed, worried about what would happen to her 6-year-old son. As doctors monitored her infection spreading, her blood pressure sinking, and her organs beginning to fail, thanks to George W. Bush and Donald Trump. For the very first time, American doctors believed that they were under a legal order made possible by the United States Supreme Court to watch a patient's infection spread, to watch a woman's blood pressure sink, to just watch her organs fail because George W. Bush and Donald Trump got what they wanted. George W. Bush and Donald Trump weren't in the operating room to watch Amber Nicole Thurman die. None of the Supreme Court justices whose decision forced her to die were there to watch their legal scholarship in action. None of the Georgia Republican politicians who wrote the law that killed Amber Nicole Thurman had to watch her die in the operating room under the sentence of death that they gave her. The doctors and the nurses who were trying to save her life, working under a law that could send them to prison, were the only people there to watch her die. Imagine what those doctors and nurses felt and what they feel tonight. The ProPublica report continues. It took 20 hours for doctors to finally operate. By then, it was too late. The otherwise healthy 28-year-old medical assistant who had her sights set on nursing school should not have died. An official state committee recently concluded, tasked with examining pregnancy-related deaths to improve maternal health. The experts, including 10 doctors, deemed hers preventable and said the hospital's delay in performing the critical procedure had a large impact on her fatal outcome. The report does not mention George W. Bush or Samuel Alito or John Roberts. The report does not mention Donald Trump or Neil Gorsuch or Brett Kavanaugh or Amy Coney Barrett. But there is no moral diagram of this crime against humanity that does not include all of those names. At the presidential debate with Kamala Harris that Donald Trump lost, Donald Trump praised the Supreme Court justices who overturned Roe versus Wade for their, quote, his words, genius, heart, and strength. In fact, those justices are morally weak, heartless fools who got what they wanted. Of course, both George W. Bush and Donald Trump were just playing politics with abortion when they were running for president. But because they are both buffoons on this subject, what they did with their presidential power in overturning Roe versus Wade has produced outcomes that surely neither one of them would have wanted. We don't know if George W. Bush knows about the death of Amber Nicole Thurman. It seems unlikely that he would. But it also seems likely that George W. Bush, who I have never met and do not know, would have the human capacity to feel very badly about what happened to Amber Nicole Thurman and about her 6-year-old son growing up without her mother. But when it mattered, George W. Bush did not care at all what could happen in the lives of real people because of the way he played politics with abortion. It surely never crossed his mind who could die because of his political choices on abortion. We know for an absolute certainty that Donald Trump is a publicly raging, narcissistic sociopath, utterly incapable of convincingly demonstrating the ability to feel sorry for anyone except himself. There actually is no public evidence that if you put Donald Trump in the operating room, watching Amber Nicole Thurman die, that in that moment he would feel badly for anyone except himself for being forced to watch it.